let's get started. So today we're talking about eating away inflammation. So first of all, just the Latin word of inflammation comes from the word inflammo, so to set alight or ignite. And often people wonder why, well, what's that got to do with what's going on in the brain, because it's a lot of what we're addressing over the weekend. And basically the significance is the immune system is responsible for that inflammatory process, okay? Most of your immune system, 80% of it, is in the lining of your gut wall. And not only that, but you've got more brain cells in your gut than you do in your brain. So this is actually your bigger brain. So when you've heard the term of gut feelings, there's a physiological basis to that as well. And not only that, but you have more immune cells in your brain than you do brain cells. So the three systems are really intimately intertwined. And whatever happens in one system is going to have a fallout effect on the others. Okay, so we need to look at the whole body approach. So acute inflammation is actually really important. Inflammation is there for a purpose. So it's not that all inflammation is bad. Otherwise we wouldn't have it. But generally speaking, it happens if you get an infection or a wound, you injure yourself, something like that. And inflammation is the body's repair response. So it's going to send tissue, cells and chemical mediators to help mop up the area, clean it up and heal it. So that's a completely beneficial response. The problem is when inflammation turns over into a chronic condition, okay? So acute inflammation, we know well generally there's redness, warmth, loss of movement and swelling. Unfortunately, chronic inflammation can often be asymptomatic. So when your immune system doesn't quite switch off, so to speak, you can go into this inflammatory state where you're not actually really aware or feeling what's going on. And the outcomes of this can be quite dramatic. So we've got destruction of tissues, which leads to loss of function of cells or organs. We've got thickening and scarring of connective tissues, death of cells, altered cell function, and hormone regulation and neurotransmitter regulation can also be sent out of kilter. And the trick is that inflammation can be self-perpetuating, so that the off switch doesn't switch. So we need to have a look at what's going on with the immune system, what's going on with regulating how your immune system is responding to different stimuli. Okay, so when it's not shut off and all those outcomes occur, the disease process, the thing that you're actually going to experience, I think could be anything along the lines of cancer, heart disease, arthritis, mood disorders, depression, anxiety, dementia even, Alzheimer's disease, inflammatory gut disorders, Crohn's disease, irritable bowel syndrome, inflammatory bowel syndromes, and poor injury, wound repair, allergies, asthma, eczema, all of these things are chronic inflammatory conditions where tissue is being injured. And so we really need to remember, again, the effect that this inflammation has on the brain, bearing in mind that we've actually got more immune cells there than we do brain cells. Now, inflammation in mind disorders. So systemic inflammation can create inflammation in the brain, and that's because the chemical mediators, the messenger system of inflammation, they cross the blood-brain barrier, and that's how it can affect brain function. But likewise, inflammation in the brain can actually result in organ or systemic inflammation. So it's a reciprocal relationship. So you might have brain inflammation and end up with joint pain, for example. Visceral inflammation is quite an important one because we have so many people with so many digestive issues or female reproductive organ issues. Because of the nerve supply we have in our visceral organs, so that's all the organs in your abdomen, we don't really feel pain in those ways, but inflammation may be present. And if inflammation is present, then that affects our skeletal system and our muscular system. And so we may get musculoskeletal problems or be prone to injury or have poor motor skills because of this inflammation that's switching off stabilizer muscles in your abdomen and can affect your hips and your knees and everything else. So what are the causes then before we start getting into the foods to address it? Well, one of the biggest ones is regulating blood sugar levels. So our diets these days, which tend to be really high starch and processed starch at that, high sugar, and not eating nutrient-dense foods. So our blood sugar levels are going up and down. We're also big fans of stimulants these days, lots of caffeine going in, which again spikes our insulin response. So high or prolonged stress is another thing that creates inflammation, and exposure to pollutants. So this can be chemicals around the house, body care products, skin care products, things that are on our food, pesticides, that kind of thing. A lack of or too much exercise. So while exercise and movement is really good, if you're really stressed, you might need to do more working in rather than working out, because working out is going to create more inflammation and more stress, okay? So when I'm talking about working in, I'm thinking meditation, yoga, or the more relaxing, calming, centering activities. And sleep is a huge one. You know, so many people aren't getting fantastic sleep these days, or are sleeping at odd hours when our hormone systems are out of balance with the daily rhythms. You know, we're affected by sunlight and darkness. These affect our pineal gland and our hormone production. So we want to make sure that we are living in sync with nature, because I think these days as well, with so much technology around and busy lifestyles, we kind of think that we should be able to do all the things that we do and not be affected, forgetting that we ourselves are also part of nature and the ecosystem, and everything has rhythm. So if we get out of rhythm with nature's rhythm, then things are going to start getting bumpy. So another one, chair sitting. So should probably all get up every now and then and jump up and down while you're listening to these lectures. Chair sitting has been shown to increase inflammation. So a lot of people are going for standing desks and things like that. But even if you just get up every now and then and do a few squats or something and star jumps or a push-up, then you're going to reduce your inflammatory response. A nutrient or poor quality diet for many reasons, as we'll get into further. Allergies, sensitivities, gut and immune disorders, or looking at gut dysbiosis, so the imbalance of the good bugs and the bad bugs in your gut, which no doubt you'll be hearing about from quite a few speakers over the weekend or have already heard about it. These symptoms, when you have chronic hay fever, for example, this is your immune system constantly in this battle. That's why chronic hay fever sufferers are often really fatigued, really tired, because your immune system is just constantly working overtime trying to protect you, but it's just got the messaging scrambled up. So you're not even necessarily in contact with dangerous substances, but it's in this hypersensitive mode. So it's really important to look at regulating your immune system so that you can A, get more energy, and B, get less inflammation. So again, chronic infections, root canals are a big one these days. High correlation with root canal and cardiovascular disease, for one example. Gut dysbiosis and candida overgrowth are others. So as I mentioned before, insulin management, really important. So insulin is the hormone that's getting sugar out of your bloodstream into your cells so that you can use it as energy or then can go on to be stored. When your cells become resistant to insulin because you've been having too much sugar or too many starches, that's called insulin resistance. It's basically a pre-diabetic condition, and that affects your stress hormones, your cortisol levels, and it increases your inflammation. And so common side effects of that are weight gain, obesity, diabetes, insulin resistance, metabolic syndrome. So let's start looking at the foods now. So these are the ones we want to avoid, okay? These are the top inflammatory foods. So sugar would have to be up there as number one. We eat so much sugar these days, and we eat so much food in general, basically. You know, we've never ever before been in a place in history where we've always had food at our fingertips. And whether it be good food or bad food, we still don't want to be having too much of it. But sugar is certainly something that we never had access to as an isolated substance, except for honey perhaps, or maybe some maple syrup if you were in Canada and tapping trees. But these days it's in so many things, packaged food, so it's really important. One of the reasons why, if you can make as much of your own food at home as possible, you're already going to be eliminating a great deal of sugar. So gluten, and this is a very conservative number, for a minimum of 60% of the population creates inflammatory disorders, and we'll get into gluten a bit more later. Refined grains. So grains in general these days tend to be very inflammatory, largely because they've been hybridized and modified and not processed properly, and we are just grinding them up and then eating them without any thought for the anti-nutrients that are in them as defense mechanisms for the plant. So these plants have these chemicals in them to help protect them against animals, so that animals don't come and eat them, except we kind of think, oh, we'll be right, and get the grains and just grind it up and make a loaf of bread. Back in the day, a loaf of bread may have taken 3 weeks to make, because you'd have to harvest the grain and soak the grain and dry the grain and stone grind the grain and ferment the flour and then make your bread. So it's not something that you'd have as a staple as we do now, yeah? Cooking oil, so if you see anything that says cooking oil or vegetable oil, you know, avoid that like the plague. They tend to be rancid and oxidized. They've got really high levels of inflammatory omega-6 oils and tend to be very low in omega-3s. Trans fats, of course. Grain-fed meat tends to be higher in inflammatory fats, so it's a very different fat profile between grain-fed and grass-fed meats. And we need to also look at alcohol, any foods that there are allergies or sensitivities to, and things like shop-bought juices, which is a very different beast than making your own fresh cold-pressed juices at home. We're running short on time, so I'm going to talk really fast. So gluten is often looked at the biological door to inflammation. To make this short and sweet, basically what it does is, in everybody, whether you're gluten sensitive or not, it increases the production of an enzyme called zonulin, which increases your gut permeability and your blood-brain barrier permeability. So it then opens you up to cross-reaction with your immune system. And so often a sensitivity to gluten won't even have any digestive issues. And there's some studies that are showing that it can actually be exclusively neurological in its presentation. So a lot of people say, oh, but you know, I've got no gut problems whatsoever, but they're depressed or anxious or can't concentrate or got ADHD, and often gluten is still playing a major role in that. So I'm going to skip over that because we're short on time. So let's look at our wonderful anti-inflammatory food. So already you'll have an amazing medicine cabinet in your kitchen, and we're going to go through what some of these common foods are now so that you can start incorporating them into your diet straight away and get some benefits from them. So my top ones are things like turmeric in particular and cinnamon. They're two of my favourite spices. And the slice that's going around at the moment, they're coconut turmeric bites. So you've got a lot of turmeric in that. Just don't get it on your clothes because it will stain. Other anti-inflammatory spices, we've got our rosemary, clove, pepper, cumin, and many more. So just get all your herbs and spices out of your cupboard. Start flavouring up your foods with those. You don't need the packet sauces from the shop. Organic blueberries, cherries, raspberries, and acai berries. Also fantastic. Blueberries have had a lot of studies where they've shown to be neuroprotective as well, so specifically protecting brain cells. Coconut oil, which is in those little turmeric bites as well, and green tea for the adults. Vitamin D, really important. Grass-fed fats, eggs, cod liver oil, and caviar are your best sources. Enzymes and probiotics, which are really rich in fermented foods in particular. And enzymes are also prevalent in fresh fruits and veggies. So having a bit of raw stuff in your diet is a really good idea. Omega-3s, so good sources are chia seeds, flax seeds and oily fish, and cruciferous veggies, so that's your broccoli, your cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, which are delicious if they're cooked properly. Put them in with some grass-fed ghee and some garlic and it's absolutely delicious. Okay, so let's have a quick look at herbs and spices. So on here we've got a list which I'll just let you read through, but traditionally used for preservation of foods, and now we're finding out how medicinal all of these different spices are. You can get onto a site called greenmedinfo.com and do a search of a food or a condition and you'll find a ton of research articles. So turmeric, as I said, one of my favourite, over 3,000 studies on it and 1,500 just on cancer alone. But it's anti-inflammatory, neuroprotective, liver supportive and antioxidant. So cinnamon and ginger combination has been really beneficial for reducing inflammation after exercise. So any athletes or dancers in here. Ginger is fantastic for reducing inflammation in the lungs, so any asthma or bronchial conditions. Tons of ginger in the diet, make ginger teas, things like that. Herbs and spices still, we've got some repeats there and we're short on time, so I'm going to keep going. And vitamin D we spoke about before, but vitamin D really affects inflammation on a systemic level, so total body level, and having adequate vitamin D levels reduces the amount of infections you're going to get, reduces your total body inflammation, and can help improve recovery from injury. So, mentioned where to get that before. Cod liver oil, grass-fed butter, pastured eggs, fish, caviar, and getting sunshine on your skin without sun cream. Chia seeds, which will be coming around for you right now. You're getting, I don't think we're going to do a demo. We have for you berry chia pudding. So we've got chia seeds with organic berries. Now organic berries is really important. There is a ton of chemicals in non-organic berries. So whether they're fresh or frozen, always choose organic. They're one of the most heavily chemical laden foods if they're not. Chia seeds, great source of omega-3 fatty acids, help improve insulin sensitivity, so reducing inflammation via that path. Reduces visceral fat, so visceral fat is the fat around your abdominal organs, and reduces cardiac and hepatic, which is your liver inflammation and fibrosis. Probiotics, hugely important. So we could do a whole session on bacteria and inflammation. Because of the vast array of effects that probiotics have on immune function and therefore inflammation. They also have a direct effect on nervous system function as well, because many of our probiotics actually are responsible for making neurotransmitters like serotonin and dopamine, which keep you happy and calm and ordered and restful. Enzymes, papain and bromelain, are two very well-researched ones and often used for musculoskeletal inflammation and asthma. But enzymes are found in a lot of raw fruit and veggies and fermented foods like sauerkraut, which you'll have been tasting today. Coconut oil is anti-inflammatory, it's a good painkiller, antipyretic, which means it's good for treating fevers. And a couple more minutes. Okay, so in terms of the spices, one of the other samples you've got going around as well is spiced almond milk, which is really delicious and a very easy way for you to get a great dose of turmeric and cinnamon into your diet. I quite like having a nice warm mug of it in the evening. It's freshly made almond milk from Inside Out Nutritious Goods. It's not Tetra Pak stuff, but it's also very easy to make your own almond milk. But the spiced nut milk that you'll be trying has turmeric and cinnamon and nutmeg and cardamom and cloves in there, and it's really yummy. So catechins, a group of compounds in lots of people's favourite foods. So green tea, cacao, only for adults please, not for kids. Too stimulating. Garlic, red grape skins, blackberries, raspberries, cherries, and similar compounds like quercetin, which is very high in onion, for example, and resveratrol, which is in red grapes. Yeah. Both of them, yeah. So the slides got changed a little bit. Yeah. Okay, so blueberries we've spoken about. I can give you, I can organise copies of these slides to be sent to you if you want, since we're running all a bit behind today and it's a little bit rushed. I do apologise. But if you want copies of the slides, then let us know and we can have them emailed out to you. Blueberries and cranberries, great studies on blueberries and cranberries and cherries. Tart cherries have shown to have similar effectiveness to non-steroidal anti-inflammatories, so things like your aspirin, for example. So imagine using cherries, which is so much yummier than aspirin to treat your headache, for example. I know which one I prefer. Ghee, really great food. Clarified butter, so the dairy solids have been taken out, and you get tons of butyric acid, which is fuel for your colonocytes, all the cells that line your bowel. And these cells are hugely important for helping to regulate your immune system, your inflammation levels, and keeping a good integrity of your gut lining, so you're not getting leaky gut, which many of you would have heard of. I'll skip over Camus. A lot of people's favourite is cacao, so it has got a huge amount of antioxidant, anti-inflammatory compounds in it, but it is extraordinarily stimulating as well. So if you are fatigued, if you do have adrenal fatigue, or if you do tend to be a bit wired, it's not necessarily the best food for you, even though it has potentially all these other benefits. And sleep, really important to get sleep. Ideally from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m, they're the best hours to be asleep, so start getting ready for bed at 9. And you'll notice 8 hours then is very different from 8 hours from 12 to 8. You don't get the same restorative kind of sleep from 12 to 8 than you will from 10 till 6. So, in summary, fresh live foods, antioxidant foods, maybe some cacao for the adults, camu, which is a berry which is really high in vitamin C, herbs and spices, blueberries, raspberries and cherries, coconut oil, ghee, chia seeds, fish and flax, they're all your great anti-inflammatory fats, fermented foods, probiotics, and making sure you restore gut flora. So if you've got any immune dysregulation things going on, asthma, eczema, allergies, autoimmunity, it really pays to have an investigation to see what's going on with your gut flora and restoring balance to that environment, because without that you're going to be chasing your tail and pushing a boulder uphill. You're not going to get the results that you're after. Vitamin C, D, A and E. So lots of your fat-soluble and water-soluble vitamins. Green tea and polyphenols. So again, green tea just for the adults because of the caffeine content. So a lot of people mistake green tea as being herb tea. It's from the same plant as black tea. Still has the caffeine in it. And do these things. So make sure you improve your insulin sensitivity, sit less and play more. So if your active time is playtime, it tends to be less stressful and more joyful. So you're more likely to do it as well. Address any organ function or dysfunction. So if you've got liver problems or you've got period pain or you've got bowel problems or anything like that, make sure you get that sorted out. Breathe deeply. Meditate if you feel you can, which you can. And sleep again. Okay, so big thank you to these guys up here who provided all the ingredients for the yummy things that you've been trying. How were they? Yeah? Good. Okay. Good answer, right answer. Okay, and if you want any more information, our website's being rebuilt at the moment. It's a little bit down, but on Tuesday it'll be back up. So visit us on Tuesday. If you have questions or you want updates, sign in and we can get info to you. Okay? So thank you, and sorry it was so rushed.
Thank you for being wonderful and